This is actually just one part of a four-part series that I posted in January of 2019 called The Black Awakening. I'm breaking it up in four episodes so that it's easier to download for people and easier to watch in, 50-minute episodes or 1 hour episodes. But I truly do encourage you to watch all the way to the end, all the way to the fourth episode, because the way I structure things, the most shocking stuff is always at the end. So it would always be in episode 4. I don't do that to bait people or anything like that. I do it because in these longer videos, I'm putting a lot of puzzle pieces together into a big picture. So I lay a foundation. I sort of build precept upon precept. So I also don't encourage you to skip all the way to the end because I lay a foundation so that people can receive. Some of this information is fringy and shocking, and if not taken in context, it's very hard for people to receive. It's a big red pill to swallow. So if you are interested in this type of content, I do encourage you to watch all four parts to this series. And thank you for taking the time to hear me out at all. Okay, in the last 4, 5, 6 videos that I've uploaded, I've been working through this series down this line of thought. These bottom 3 Antarctica videos and these top 2 in the Age of Deceit series, all of those precede this information. We started back talking about what is going on in Antarctica, and we've walked through a lot of suppressed technologies and things like that that they are using for mind control through these MK Ultra programs, and even through biology and biological sciences, through genetic engineering and breeding programs like Lebensborn. So I want to kind of tie all of that together and take it to the next level. So why are they doing this? Why do they have a breeding program and a mind control program and all of that sort of thing? And the answer is The Black Awakening. This is a book by Russ Dizdar, and I know most of you know very well who he is. If you're on this channel, you probably know all about Russ Dizdar. But for those who don't, he is our brother in Christ, and his specific calling is working with victims of these mind control programs, victims of satanic ritual abuse. For the last 40 years or more, really now, he has been working with the survivors of these SRA families. As he took these victims through deprogramming and deliverance, he began to unveil a common theme, and that is this coming rise of the satanic super soldier, which amounts to what we would call sleeper cells, that they have pre-programmed sleeper cells like Manchurian candidates everywhere, just waiting for their trigger command to launch, quote unquote, the event, which is the sudden ambush and overthrow of the governments of the world and the implementation of the Antichrist regime, which we call the New World Order. And they describe an event that's quite a bit different than we see in, say, the Red Dawn movies. Like in Red Dawn, it was just portrayed as a military invasion, and the teacher was caught off guard, the students were caught off guard, it was just an ambush. They say the event that they have planned has pre-positioned the teachers, has pre-positioned people all the way down to the local level. So while we're looking at the Illuminati politicians and the rich elitists, we're thinking they're just elitists. They're not just elitists. They have structured it so precisely and diabolically that they have positioned operatives all the way down at the lowest levels in every industry, every profession, every local government, that type of thing. So when the day comes for the takeover, instead of seeing things like this, where the teacher rises up and wants to protect the children and what's going on, it'll be completely different. The invasion will come, and the professors and teachers will tell their children to remain seated, and they will just walk right in. They will walk right in and take control of the classrooms. They will walk right in and take control of the governments. They will take control of the manufacturing plants because the CEOs are already in the cabal. They're already here. The invasion has honestly already happened. The changeover, the event, the externalization of the hierarchy to where we acknowledge that they're the ones in control. That's really all we're waiting on. Now, I know right about here, people are going to say, that's impossible. How could they be so organized that they would be able to infiltrate all the way down to every single small town? How could there be that many of them? And how could they organize such a thing? Well, again, I have to tell you, this is not a theory. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a fact. Look at the Masonic lodges in every small town. I'm showing you pictures of them. Go to your phone book right now, Google it, search it, and find out, where are these towns? Where are the small towns that don't have a Masonic lodge or a chapter of the Masonic lodge? So if you don't think that organizations could possibly be so big and so vast and infiltrate not just the big city of New York, but down to every single small town, and all still remain part of one entity that answer to the Grand Poobah, well, you're just not in touch with reality, because it's a fact that they have done it, and you can see it right here. Yes, it is very possible for these covens to be so organized and answer to a central power, and yet still reach their tentacles into every small community in America at least, but worldwide. This is worldwide. But I can only speak from here in America and what I see on my streets in our towns. And yes, it's completely possible. They are in every small town, and it goes beyond just the lodges, because then they go out and recruit all of the business owners, all of the local politicians, anybody who has any influence in the town. They go directly toward them. They're taught to target them and recruit them. Of course, they're taught at the very lower levels because it's compartmentalized. They don't have any idea that they are organizing this thing for this coven. At the lower levels, they believe, oh, this is just a great fraternity. It's a brotherhood where we get all of the leaders in the town, right? Who doesn't want to hobnob with the leaders in the town? But this is how it's done. It's very real. And these covens do go out and infiltrate every small town and recruit all of the leaders in that town. Some of them rise through the ranks and become loyal. Others never really rise through the ranks. So they probably will be okay. But they probably need deliverance if they've been practicing these rituals. And it's not just the Masonic lodges. Another way that they infiltrate all the way down to the local level from a centralized government is just that, government. They use government. So we all have local governments, and then we have state governments, and then we have federal governments, and then they're trying to establish the United Nations, which is the world government. And they're constantly pushing for every lower level to give up sovereignty. So they want the United States to renounce its sovereignty, and everything from, say, gun control laws to the World Court to all of that will be handled by the United Nations, which we know is a conglomerate of tyrants. They're almost all dictators. They hate freedom. Any nation that has, this pseudo-democracy thing going, or a republic like we have, they absolutely want us to renounce sovereignty and come under their structure of dictatorship. And again, they've been working on that for generations, because the United States of America was exactly that. At one time, the states were almost like independent nations. They had sovereignty, state sovereignty, to run their communities and their state the way their people believed and wanted. But now we see they've already accomplished that at those lower levels. So the United States federal government has usurped that sovereignty, and they've begun telling the states what to do, instead of the states' representatives telling the federal government what to do. So that we the people, for the people, by the people thing has already been overthrown. It's just on paper at this point. And that goes all the way down to every single local community. If you want to have a school in a small town, I lived in a town of 700. That's a true story. The sign said when you drove into town, population 700. So if that town, their school system, those 700 people decided that they wanted to teach the Holy Bible in their curriculum, in their public education system, and give their children a broad view of all of world culture, they still would not be allowed to do that. The federal government would intervene. The ACLU, which is the legal arm of the cabal, would come in and say, no, we ban it. It doesn't matter what you 700 people want to teach your children. You will not teach it because we choose which books are banned and all of that type of thing. So we have to come to terms with the fact we're all fighting for freedom and privacy and things like that. And all of those things are already gone. So anyway, my point is that it's not just the Masonic lodges. They have also infiltrated all the way down to the local level through what we call government. So it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. This is not just an American thing. The cult has overlaid themselves on top of all the tribes of humanity and made their cult our culture. So that's one thing I've noticed in the truther community. People have gotten really hung up on the Masonic lodges and they want to prove, oh, this politician or this preacher or this person is a member of the Masons. It doesn't matter. There are tons of cabal members that they don't need the Masonic channels to do their coven stuff. This satanic cult predates Masonry. They created those societies as just one arm, one tentacle of their cult of the quote unquote ancient ones. Masonry is just one infrastructure that they use to infiltrate all the way down to local levels in their power structure. Government is another one. They're not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of crossover in those secret societies and that type of thing, but it's not mandatory that everybody has to come up the Masonic way. There are plenty of satanic cult members who don't need to come through Masonry. They come through every single culture. Another way they infiltrate all the way down to the local levels is through church organizations. Like we know the Catholic Church is a big one. They try to have a Catholic Church in every town, in every city that answers to a central command called the Vatican. And even then, just like the Masonic lodges, this Jesuit branch of this ancient cult, they are not at the top of the pyramid. They are just one more arm of this ancient cult. I'll do the timeline a little later, but I've pointed out in this series several times in every video I try to touch on it. There's a reason why the Pope and the cardinals and the Catholic power structure wear Jewish yarmulkes. This is not a coincidence. This infiltration traces all the way back to what we call the Ashkenazi Jews, where we get the term Nazi, and they're not really Jews at all. I've gone through all that in the other videos. Please go back and watch them if you haven't already. And we also see that Germanic culture from the Germanic Goths. That's where we get the term Gothic, and that's why we see the Gothic cathedrals during that era that are covered in statues of demons and gargoyles and witches and all of that type of thing. But again, this thing predates Germany. It even predates what we call the Ashkenazi Jews and goes back to the Sabbateans and further back. So we'll get into all that later. This cult has been infiltrating already existing organizations as well as setting up their own organizations. And just like in the Masonic lodges, I don't think every Catholic who goes to a Catholic church is in on this or is evil or anything like that. Of course not. There's lots of people who love Jesus Christ and are seeking him, but have been led astray into these organizations like the Catholic Church. And if you are in the Catholic Church, you need to realize it's time to come out. Come out of Babylon. Now's the time. There are plenty of remnant believers in Jesus Christ that you can fellowship with, but no, the hierarchy, the bureaucracy of the Catholic Church is rotten to the core, and they are Satanists. And as you can see from this architecture of the serpent's head, they have become very overt, very open with their serpent worship, which is the way their cults did it in ancient times. They would always have the serpent on their staff or the serpent on their forehead. Their headdresses and armor always show that their serpent god was on their head. But their allegiance from culture to culture varies in their expression. You take like the Hindu gods, they'll be riding on serpents, or they'll be surrounded by serpents. They'll have serpents wrapped all around their arms and body. Just completely encompassed in that spirit that they serve. They were open about it. And we're seeing that again in today's society in a modern way, that they're becoming more and more open about it as they externalize the hierarchy. But my point is, as far as the placement of operatives for the Black Awakening and these programs that are going on, it doesn't just come through Freemasonry. They infiltrate down to the local levels and answer to a centralized government through many tentacles. Another way that they have infiltrated and transplanted themselves throughout the entire world is through industry. We know that a lot of the heads of these major corporations, that's why we always talk about the military industrial complex, that they have taken over these industries. They have such small numbers. It's amazing that they've done this, because it's not that everybody in the whole corporation is in on it, but they have taken over the decision making levels, the top levels, the CEOs and things like that of these corporations. So all of these people below them on the corporation are serving this agenda and enriching these people, making minimum wage and stuff, enriching these, and they don't even realize that they are a sort of slave race, quote unquote human resource for these parasites. They just think, oh, I hope I get a raise to $8 an hour. If I'm going to sell my life to these people, I at least want to get $10 an hour for it, or so much per year on salary or whatever. But they never stop to think, wait a second, why am I selling my life to these people? What is this? That can they buy me? Did they just buy my life? I'm going to spend my life doing something I hate, sitting in a cubicle so these people become billionaires? They just don't think about it, because they're still in the trance. They were born into it. That's why these people are so diabolical to have done this generationally. Because if you did all of this as sort of an infiltration, a coup d'etat in one generation, everybody would see. But they're very, very diabolical. So most of us, well, all of us, were born into it. We think it's normal to be called a resource like coal or oil. We're like, oh yeah, report to human resources office. I'm just a resource for this corporation, high-tech slave trade. And it just never occurs to them, to question it, because they were born into it, which should give us some compassion and understanding for these people in these SRA families who are brought up in this satanic ritual abuse, trauma-based mind control, family, horrific Nazi experiment thing, because they also were born into it. And they've had it a lot worse than we've had it. So it's very, very hard for them to defect. It's almost impossible. But anyway, corporations, yes, the corporations are another way that they have taken total control all the way down to the local level. If you go back through history and research it and watch it play out from the beginning of the industrial age till now, you can see that they have merged everything into one central government, but it's considered corporations, and they keep some of them separate and they merge a lot of them publicly. But everybody knows that it doesn't matter. Every farm in America, if you're getting Tyson chicken or you're getting generic chicken or you're getting it from this farm or that farm, they've all been bought up by these conglomerates. And it's the same way with all of the media. You might think, oh, I'm watching HBO and it's a different channel than ESPN, or it's a different channel than the military history channel on A&E, or I'm watching Chiller, I'm just watching scary movies or sci-fi movies, or I'm just watching children's shows. My kid, he's just watching Disney, or they're just watching MTV. I'm just watching music. No, what you're watching is a program. You're being programmed. These are all owned by the same people. And although monopolies are illegal, so they don't openly say that all of these nodes or nerve centers are also essentially owned by one central command. And that's why they hate free speech so much. That's why they hate us so much. And they're actively, through technology and algorithms and manual reviews and everything, removing us from even social media, not just YouTube where you broadcast, but other places where you can just like post on your status wall. You can just say your feelings. Like they don't even want that. They are censoring and monitoring Twitter and Facebook and YouTube to remove all of us and calling us fake news and, all the same stuff. demonizing us and all of that, because we're the last bastion. We're the last bastion. We are the ones who refuse to take part in their echo chamber. They don't want any dissenting voice, because besides us, they have captured the broadcast, the voice of humanity down to the minute local levels. You think you have local news? Really?
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media publish things are true without checking facts first.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So it's just a fact. Whether people can cope with that or not, it's a fact. These are scripts that they're given. This is not a conspiracy theory. You just saw it with your own eyes. You know what goes on. Television programs are just that. They are called programs because they're programs. They are designed to program your brains like a computer, and we're allowing it. It's like, if you haven't watched the last video about hypnotism and the trance state and Hollywood, please go back and watch that. It's this one right here with the hypnotized eye looking thumbnail, and it talks about the world stage and cults and the hive mind and all of that type of thing. It's the part 2 to the breeding program 1. If you're watching on my backup channel, then this thumbnail will look like puzzle pieces, putting puzzle pieces together. We have to break free of their programming. This is MK Ultra programming coming through all of these nerve centers right into our brains. It's a script. They are programming us. So I want to get into some of these reports, not just the ones that Russ talks about, because this goes back, way back through ancient history, that they have been building up to this point where their control network is sufficiently in place that they can launch it. Like I always say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So in this series, I've been trying to pick a couple of motion pictures for each one to give us a general sort of picture in our minds of this event. And in the last one, you know, I was talking about the Truman Show meets They Live. So that could give you sort of a concept. I mean, if they're going to do all of this predictive programming, we might as well use it for good. So in this particular video, for this part, talking about the event, the two that came to mind were, it's sort of like Red Dawn. So if you've seen both of those, then you have a concept of how these things happen. And in Rosemary's Baby, how she was being drugged and all of the heads of the community were in on it and stuff like that. You're going to see a lot of similarities when I start playing the clips of interviews from these SRA survivors. In fact, at the very end of the first one, the breeding program video, the Trans Agenda and Breeding Program Age of Deceit video, and I had the clips from the super soldier at the end, his testimony. That super soldier testimony was Max Spears, but he is now dead. He died while on the circuit trying to tell this story, just like Phil Schneider. And this was one thing he mentioned specifically, was that he would go to people's houses and they would offer him a drink and it would be drugged. And then he would sort of be coming to while they were doing this ritual on him, trying to put this entity in him and things like that. So anyway, as we move forward talking about this Black Awakening, those are the two. This is sort of like Rosemary's Baby meets Red Dawn. So now I want to get down to the super soldiers, to the individual sleeper cell type people, and talk about that a little bit. But this is a picture from Red Dawn. This is still shot from Red Dawn when they go into the town, and you can see there's still people eating in the subway amidst all of this. And the mayor of the town was a communist sympathizer, so other than lose control, he just kind of became one of them. So that's sort of what I'm talking about here, only they're not going to have to convert these people. These people are already part of the network and in place in the communities, so they will do that. And the reason I chose this picture, although it seems sort of meaningless in the scheme of things, was that it specifically reminded me of a prophetic vision that God had given me years ago, years and years ago. And that it really shocked me that after the event had begun and it was darkness, the power was out in the towns, it was like all of this sort of thing. And I was surprised that Walmart and McDonald's were still open amidst all this. All the other businesses were closed, all the local locally owned businesses were closed. It was like a ghost town everywhere. But these big corporations like Walmart and McDonald's, they had some sort of backup generators or something, and they were involved, they were functioning through the midst of all of this. And at the time, I couldn't really make sense of that. But now, as I've done my research and everything, yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I've done several videos on that, Walmart's collusion in all of this, not just the Casa Padre thing and what we're seeing with DHS. That was more of a sort of stepping stone confirmation. But this video right here, Walmart FEMA exposed. America needs to see this, new 2018. That's just a 14-minute video, but it really talks about who Sam Walton is, who he really is. He was involved in the concentration camps during World War II. And then he sets up this distribution network all across America, and then how it's more, and elsewhere, and how that then is morphed into them having these FEMA response teams. So I think it's really, really important that people watch this. I also included in there a handful of 5 or 6 people's dreams or visions, totally unrelated people who all had dreams and visions of Walmarts being used as these sort of refugee camps because they were the ones who had the supplies. So the masses went to them willingly. So since we just went over all of the corporate structure all the way down to the local levels, I think it's important to mention Walmart. Walmart is absolutely one of those. And this is a syndicate that was set up, a system that was put in place purposefully. And Sam Walton worked for the intelligence community, and he specialized in supervising concentration camps here in America. Here in America, remember during World War II, after Pearl Harbor was bombed, and we set up these, what they didn't call them concentration camps, but they rounded up all of the Japanese people and some German people and all of that. All that is in this video. So Sam Walton was in charge of those camps. And then after World War II, he began setting up this Walmart network that we see now, all the way down to the local level. And these interviews are also really eerie to me because what they're saying is exactly what God showed me in some of my prophetic glimpses over the years. And I'm not one who gets a ton. I don't have prophetic dreams every night or every week or every month. But, you know, sometimes it'll be 5 years in between. Usually if I need a course correction, if God has to do something drastic to intervene, or there's some part of my destiny that I'm just not seeing, that I don't know about, and then he will show me, and then I can research it, which is exactly how I came across most of this, because God shows me something that is completely out of left field for me in my frame of reference, and then I research it and find out that it's absolutely true. So anyway, talking about these satanic super soldiers, I had I posted this back in 2015, but I think I had the vision a year or so before I posted it. So this is about 5 years ago. And I had this vision about martial law, that it had started with this, what they would call the Black Awakening. It didn't start with the sort of Red Dawn tanks on the street or anything like that. The people I saw, and I had, you can see here, End Time Dream Vision, ISIS attack on American interstates. I interpreted that at the time as ISIS because they were all dressed in black, and that was really all the only frame of reference I had. But now in hindsight, you know, Antifa, they weren't really getting any press at all before Trump got in office. So, but it's that same sort of all dressed in black mob mentality, like terrorist sleeper cell type deal. But that's exactly what I saw. And the attack that I saw was on American interstates. And it happened all across the United States of America at the same time. I can't speak for the rest of the world. In my vision, I was just shown what happened in America. But anyway, then the vision jumps forward to some time in the future, and I was shown how they had taken over the manufacturing plants, and none of this made sense to me at all when I was seeing it. And that they were also in like the police departments, and we knew the military wasn't going to help us either. It was like the citizens were on their own, sort of like Red Dawn, you know, with the Mavericks or whatever, what are they called? The Wolverines. But yeah, so we were out in the rural areas in the country, and all the young men had come together who knew how to use their hunting rifles and knew how to use weapons. And we had maps laid out on the tables, like people's kitchen tables, and we were defending ourselves. And you can see I posted these two at the same time. Then, like a week later, after that, or a little while after that, I got another prophetic vision from God. And I was looking out that's this one, warning, dream, vision, end time riots, martial law, concentration work camps, Chinese soldiers. And in that one, I was looking out my window and there were riots on the street. People were like, they were resisting police and like throwing things at them. And it culminated in all of these vehicles, these sort of Humvee looking vehicles came into the neighborhood, and they were parked like every 2 blocks. And these soldiers were coming to the house, like 2 by 2 to every house. And then that one again jumps forward in time several months, maybe, I mean, could have even been a year. There was a lot of time covered in that vision. And later on, we were on buses. We were taken on buses. My family was, and other families, to these concentration work camps. And we were building little like electronic parts at tables. And there were Chinese soldiers with guns standing guard over us. And then even later on, I had another vision where Russia was involved and they had taken over hospitals and converted them into processing centers. So that always seemed like that's a lot going on. But that's what these SRA escapees from these Illuminati families have been saying. They're saying that they've taken over the military, or at least that they have high-ranking operatives in the military. And, you know, that's what we saw during World War II. Emperor Hirohito was never prosecuted because the investigation revealed that it was his military was not following his command. His military had gone rogue. And the generals in the military were commanding the people below them. So they were launching a war against Emperor Hirohito's rule. And you know, we're seeing that now. We have a president, but the services below him refuse to honor him in any way. They're trying to do a coup. They're trying to get rid of him because they want to run the country the way they want to run the country, and they won't acknowledge him as the elected president. Whether you believe there's really elections or not, you know, the case is very similar to what we saw with Emperor Hirohito. And at the same time, another iteration of that, done slightly differently, was going on in Germany, where Hitler didn't take over the existing military. That's not the way that happened. He started his own sort of force that was going on the same time as the military. And so he had the brown shirts, and then there was Germany's actual military. They were two different things. So there was resistance there at first. He didn't go through the channels and just like he was the president of Germany and he had control of the military. No, he started his own military force. And worldwide, we just sort of call them the Men in Black. They're Men in Black. We don't know who they are. They just sort of show up. If you discover something or invent something that could actually benefit humanity, they just sort of show up and take it and silence you. Or if you witness these Nephilim or cryptid hybrid creatures, whether it's a quote unquote alien or if it's a Sasquatch or something, they just sort of show up, these Men in Black. It's this secret military. It's the secret military. It's the deep state, deeper than the deep state, secret military. And that's not to say that they don't have operatives in our military. Of course they do. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. But how people believe that there are white hats in the military who have recognized this corruption and are trying to weed it out. And that's why all these firings in the FBI, and that's why the FBI is fighting Trump so hard, which I don't doubt one bit, because I did a video, where is it? This one, The Raid, Eerie Similarities of Trump versus the FBI and JFK versus J. Edgar Hoover. Because, you know, J. Edgar Hoover had secret files on everybody, was blackmailing everybody, and stood in the way every chance he got when JFK tried to fight organized crime, syndicates, and the mafia, and the communist weapon running, and all that. And J. Edgar Hoover was a known homosexual. He dressed up in women's clothes and all sorts of, that's all in that video if you guys want to watch it. The actual, in their own words, people, testimony from that era, women and society people who said, yeah, absolutely, I saw him doing that. So again, the trans agenda, it's always been present. We just kind of overlook it. People are like, I don't want to think about J. Edgar Hoover dressing up in a dress and calling himself Mary. Like, that's really gross. And now they're like, okay, I can accept that he was a homosexual, and all those pictures of him with his quote unquote partner and all of that. But at the time and throughout all these eras, people have just denied this trans agenda was part of reality, but it has always been present. But as far as the white hats, whether you believe that QAnon has anything to do with the white hats or any of that is really irrelevant. There are good people in our military, absolutely. And do I believe that some of these people might have organized and be covertly fighting this satanic cult? Absolutely, because look back at Ted Gunderson. I mean, we're going back decades and decades. Again, he's dead now, but when he was doing it, he was fighting Satanism. That's what it was. The McMartin preschool case. It was the Franklin cover-up, all child trafficking. He was fighting it decades and decades ago, long before QAnon, anyone had ever heard of QAnon last October. There are people in the FBI, and even after he retired, he referred cases to what he called not white hats, but people in the FBI that he knew could be trusted, and were helping him research these satanic cults that were real, although the mainstream would not take this seriously. And of course, now we know, because a lot of the mainstream are them. Instead, they just sort of started a propaganda campaign called Satanic Panic to make everybody look crazy who came forward and said, yes, I came up in a family like that. Yes, I saw those rituals. Yes, this is true. All of the children, even. In the Johnny Gosch case, the Bonacci kid who testified, they put him in jail for perjury because he testified against these powerful politicians. Obviously, it was a corrupt judge who was in the cabal. And they punished the children who were victims of the sex trafficking and put them in jail. True story. We'll get into the Johnny Gosch case here in a second too. But my point is that there really are white hats, whether that has anything to do with the QAnon phenomenon or not. These people exist. You can go back and watch Ted Gunderson used his life. He was constantly exposing not just corruption, not political corruption. He was exposing Satanism. Satanism. He called it what it was all those decades ago. It's Satanism. And what these SRA insiders are saying is going to happen, that there are going to be these lower level super soldier ambushes, and it's going to lead to civil unrest, and there's going to be martial law declared eventually, that there's a domino effect event that is set up. It's not going to be like one event. It's going to be a domino effect, a series of events, like these ambushes that destabilizes America, and then we have to have martial law, and then the martial law turns into basically an occupation when UN peacekeepers and other forces come in and under the guise of trying to help us or whatever, and they occupy us, and then further down the line, they start moving us into ghettos and concentration camps, and which is exactly what we see with Agenda 21 and 2030, is that exactly how the Nazis first moved the Jews into ghettos before they put them on the trains into camps. First, they corralled them into certain living areas. The same way the Native American Indians were corralled into reservations. Well, they're doing it to all of us now, and that's Agenda 21. They have these sanctioned areas, these ghettos or reservations, to herd the survivors into. And from the looks of the maps and the legislation and how it's going, is that they get all of the land. And then there will be little dots of concentrations of us, concentration camps, even if they are the size of an entire reservation. I don't know exactly how that'll play out in all areas, but you can, research Agenda 21 and you can see this is precisely what they're doing, is making the majority of the land off limits to us. It's theirs, it's government land. But if I had to guess, I would say that probably that phase of the roundup won't happen until the nations in the axis of evil actually invade our coastlines and come in. Anybody who follows prophecy knows that everybody, tons of people for decades and decades have reported God showing them exactly that. We know that's coming. And I really think that'll come before people are herded into these regions. I think the martial law part and the chaos isn't going to lead immediately to these concentration camps. And the vision that I personally had that I was telling you guys about a few minutes ago, that was the order of events. There was martial law first because of the civil unrest and something that was going on, but we were still in our homes at that time. And it was several months later in the vision, it was several months later that we got the knock on the door and we had to get on the buses, and they were taking us to these concentration areas. And I think that's a pretty standard interpretation. Most people believe that, of course, these forces are going to invade us when we're at our weakest, when we're in the middle of a crisis, whether that is recovering from some huge natural disaster, some massive earthquake, the New Madrid fault line or something. Everybody seems to agree that the actual invasion from these other nations who are part of the axis of evil won't come until we are completely weakened in a state of disarray already. And at that point, we'll be under the dictatorship of the Antichrist. And honestly, there's a pretty big chance that there's even a step above that to the Antichrist regime, and that's the introduction of the UFO disclosure. Because it appears that these UFO abductees have been programmed for generations with this literally, they report being made to sit in front of screens and watch what the quote unquote aliens are showing them, that there's these cataclysms coming to the world and nuclear war is coming, and these aliens are going to be our saviors. Not only did they seed the earth, and that's why, humans aren't monkeys anymore, because they're our creators, but they're also our saviors. And that's right, that's Antichrist. They're claiming to be God, the savior and creator. And that's when they step in and bring order out of chaos. They're going to save the dumb humans from destroying themselves, and they have the technology to stop the nuclear war. And I've done lots of videos on that, how all of these UFO incidents where they'll hover over nuclear missile silos and deactivate or change the codes, frequency hack, wirelessly frequency hack our missile silos. And there's been tons of them. The military men who witnessed it have testified and everything. But if you want to look into it, a few of them are the Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967, Minot Air Force Base in 67 and 68. There were 10 nuclear silos, or 10 nukes in silos that were deactivated sequentially. There were also British missiles deactivated. And remember the Rendlesham Forest incident? That was a nuclear facility. And it also happened in Russia. I mean, it's happened all over the world, but those are a few if you want to get your feet wet. I mean, and obviously that's to manipulate and socially engineer the decisions of the human militaries in all of these nations, because it's happened in multiple nations. Maybe those were nations that they were having trouble coming into peace treaties with, or getting the governments to work with them or something. And it was a show of force that, hey, you don't have anything that'll work against us, or, who knows. But anyway, I'm saying that after the human war starts, then the order out of chaos is coming from this UFO disclosure, which again reminds me right here, this end time dream that I had. This was posted 2 years ago. It only got 884 views, so I wonder what that's all about. But it's end time dream, UFOs, stores closed, Walmart, red pink atmosphere. I had this vision of that. This was the one I was talking about where I was shocked that Walmart was still open and McDonald's was open. And because the atmosphere, this event was huge, like we're seeing now with the purple skies and all this plasma stuff, that's this plasma physics that's going on, like a static ball. We're seeing the light, the sky flash and turn magenta and red, and like the aurora borealis, the northern lights, everywhere, like just in the middle of the country, they're everywhere because there's something going on. This is a celestial event. But anyway, years and years ago, before the purple skies, I was shown in a vision that this is what the skies would look like. And I put it in this video, even though nobody watched it. It's there recorded that it looked like the aurora borealis over Illinois. And there was no power. The power was out. So there, I don't know if that brought down the cloaking shields or something that these UFOs were using. I don't know, but I saw in the sky these things zipping around, zigzagging around all over the place. And it was like disclosure. They weren't like walking around in the streets or anything, but it was, everybody knew, like, hey, this is now we know. Here they are. They're everywhere. What's going to happen? What is going to happen? And I was talking to a guy in the dream about it, and about it being the end times, and he's like, my mom still doesn't believe that, you know. And she was a worker. She was a worker at, I think, Walmart, and she was still going to work instead of being with her family. She could not believe it was the end time. She was like, this is just a thing, and it's the next stage, you know, in human evolution, and you know, everything's going to be fine. We just need to hold tight. And absolutely would not. He was saying that he couldn't reason with her, that she couldn't believe that this was the end of the world and Jesus Christ was coming, even at that point when it was like pitch blackness, the skies had changed colors, there's UFOs darting everywhere, there was like an EMP or a solar flare, there's no power anywhere, everything, the entire economy had collapsed, every store was closed except these couple of major ones that were supplying everybody, and she still was going to work saying, oh, it's no big deal, it's going to be fine. But anyway, all the Walmart videos and the ones I've mentioned about my visions and stuff, I'll put those links down below in the description box. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can go and watch. But I don't have any way to vet like Svali's testimony or these different whistleblowers' testimony other than what God himself has shown me. And that's basically how I vet everything. So when I hear certain testimonies of these really famous whistleblowers that are going around stuff and it contradicts things that the Lord has already shown me, you know, that's how I vet things. So that's why I chose Svali and some of these other testimonies I'm getting ready to show you guys, is because they completely explain everything that the Lord has shown me is coming. So I want to start weaving together some of these different testimonies from totally different people, decades apart, centuries apart even. I'm going to go all the way back to Count Saint Germain, who supposedly was an immortal that they kept from these secret societies that kept popping up throughout Europe in the records. So there's a lot of strange mysteries that have gone on in history that we've just kind of counted as anomalies or myths or whatever. And I want to weave all those together using the testimonies of Illuminati whistleblowers like Svali, using the testimonies of people who have come out of witchcraft covens and MK Ultra programs like Mary Lou Lake, and using the research of incredible researchers like Russ Dizdar and his 40 years of experience with these SRA victims. Because doing that, when you take everything into consideration, all of the records, all of the testimony, all of ancient history, we can see that there is one thread that runs through the entire picture. There is a thread of truth that is mind-boggling. And that truth is that there is a cabal, a satanic coven, who has taken over the world through covert crime syndicate type means. And they are so sophisticated, they run like a corporation, like organized crime. I mean, that's what it is. That's what the family is. So like I've pointed out in the earlier videos in this series, is that we have to escape this reductionist thinking that everybody wants to focus on, oh, Rothschild, 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 or Masons, the Freemasons, whatever it is. And I want to point out, to understand what we're up against, we need to see this in the context of what it really is, and the enormity of what it really is. And the Rothschilds are just one node. They call them nerve centers, and how the coven functioned as a corporation. So they would have administrative offices in, say, Virginia, and they would have training offices in San Diego, and they were structured just like a corporation. So they did have banking centers. The Rothschilds do play a huge part in the banking, in the central banking part of the takeover, but that's just one part of the takeover. But just to lay the foundation as we start to discuss this information, I want to get your mind thinking bigger. This isn't just about the Rothschilds. It's not about Freemasons. It's not about the Jesuits even. It's not even about the Ashkenazi Jews. And we've talked about all of those different tentacles of this cabal over the last several videos. But now I want to take it the step higher, because beyond that, all of those nodes that we have uncovered and discussed, they are part of a bigger beast. And to really even understand the Holy Scriptures, we have to perceive this for what it is. This is a war against humanity. This is not a geographical war. This is a war against all of humanity. And even further, let's take it a step further. This transcends humanity. So we are not just in a war to save humanity from extinction. We are one part of a war that is going on in higher dimensions. There was a rebellion in heavenly dimensions, and this entity is trying to take control. We know that's not going to happen, but we still have to do our part. And we are not just fighting for humanity, we are fighting for our God, the Most High God, the Holy One, because we don't want hell. We don't want hell on earth. And it's up to us as the embodiment of the Holy Spirit to restore and subdue the earth and bring it back to utopia. And they are working to turn it into hell. So when we say things like, boy, world's going to hell in a handbasket, no, it really is. This is a war for this realm, a spiritual war. This isn't just a religion, the book of Revelation. Oh yeah, Armageddon's coming. No, hey, do you know what that means? That there is about to be a standoff between the forces of Satan and the forces of Jesus Christ that will culminate in the Battle of Armageddon? Well, if you haven't pondered the magnitude of that, hopefully by the time we get done with this video, you will. There are kings of the earth that will gather together with the Antichrist, and they will literally, they are so arrogant, they literally believe that they can stop the return of Christ. They have been working for generations on every possible means, spiritual, technological. You go to the Montauk Project, they're coming at him through time travel, trying to change history through time travel, messing with the actual dimensional matrix. They've practiced with frequency technologies, opening stargates, closing stargates. Why is it on Saturn that all of a sudden we see this hexagon on the top? What does that mean? What is happening? Is the sun a portal? What's happening? Well, they know what's happening, and they are using all of these interdimensional technologies from the Nephilim races that we call, the aliens, to try and beat God. It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable story that the Bible says culminates in all of the armies of the Antichrist and the nations who have rebelled against God coming together in the valley of Megiddo. That's where we get the term Armageddon, that they all come together in the valley of Megiddo to try to stop the return of Jesus Christ. They think they can reign in this world and they can stop his return. So I'm going to go into those technologies and the Vatican telescopes. What are they looking at? What are they looking for up there? What is happening? How does everything that we see going on around us that just seems so bizarre, how does it really fit together and make perfect sense? And make no mistake, once you break free of their programming, of their trance, of their mind control, you can see that all of history does make sense. History is his story. It's always been all about the return of Christ. It's always been all about the redemption of this world, this dimension. This is his story, and it is the greatest story ever told. This is what they're hiding from you. This is the forbidden history. They're hiding God. They're hiding the meaning of life. There's a reason why they ban the Bible from public education. While they'll teach any other pagan religions, they teach Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, in literature, in history, and lots of different curriculums, but not the Bible. No, it is strictly banned with pinpoint accuracy. This is the forbidden history. They don't want you to know the meaning of life. They don't want you to know who you are and why you're here. And why would they? Of course, they don't want the people of God assembling and fighting them in any way, resisting them even in any way. No, their deception is they convince you there isn't an enemy. Don't worry, you don't have any enemies. The devil doesn't even exist. That's their tactic. That's what the Bible says. 1 Thessalonians 5:3. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come upon them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. And that's the plan. It's an ambush. It's an ambush. They are planning an ambush. It's called the Black Awakening, with all of these sleeper cells and so much more. And the whole time they're convincing you, oh, those crazy conspiracy theorists. And that's what the Bible says. God says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Despite the fact that we are out here teaching and preaching day and night, trying to convey the truth, these people who are completely brainwashed by their professors and by the cabal operatives at all levels, they are oblivious. They are completely oblivious. And while they're dumbing down our human children, they're preparing their children. In this interview I'm getting ready to play you, Svali talks about how every child by the age of 8 can take their weapon apart. And I've been in boot camp, so I know exactly what she's talking about, how they teach you to break your weapon down in a certain amount of time and break it down really fast and put it back together really fast. She's talking about being trained to do that before she was 8 years old. And likewise were her children taught. She said all of the children are. She said even if they test the children and profile them to which sort of thing they're better suited for. Some are politicians, some are teachers, some go into the scientific fields, others go into different industries. She said 40% of her coven there in San Diego were active members of the military. And I'll go into some more of that in a minute too. But she was adamant that there was foundational programming and training in place that all children in the SRA families went through, and this was one of them: weapons training, martial arts training, things of that nature. So while they've made our children so weak and powerless that they need a safe space if somebody even says a word like Trump, they need a puppy and a coloring book, and that is triggered, and it's a microaggression, and what am I going to do? And it's so offended. And, they've got our children so confused. They literally cannot even tell if they're a boy or a girl. There's a plan here. They are weakening us to the point that they believe there's absolutely no way we could withstand them at all. There's absolutely no way that this younger generation of humans could do something like we see in Red Dawn, organize and strategically think and do without food and do without water and go, hide and have all of this. No, they want our children over in the corner sucking their thumb, rocking in the fetal position, wondering why Google isn't banning these guys. Don't they know that I don't like this? And why is Twitter allowing this? You know, that's what they want our kids to be doing. And that's what a large majority of our kids are doing. So we're here. So let's get into it. But as we talk about what the cabal is trying to do, don't fall into fear or doom or anything. I want to point out as we start to delve into this Black Awakening that they are no competition. This has been written, this has been prophesied. We know what's happening. We know who we are. If you are truly woke, if you are truly in the body of Christ, then the Bible says the same Spirit who raised Jesus Christ from the dead dwells in us. Wrap your mind around that. The same Spirit who rose Jesus Christ from the dead lives in us. That's who we are. So if the Lord has woken you up to stand with Jesus Christ and to preach this good news, to preach this gospel to the end of the world, if God has called you to do that and he has woken you up in this era of world history, this amazing time to be alive, then you got to know that the same Spirit that raised Jesus Christ from the dead lives in us. That's who we are. I couldn't care less about their abracadabra or their magic wands or any of their silly enchantments, their dark magic, their dark arts. Ooh, you know, the only thing that makes it so mysterious is that they've hidden it from us. That's what a cult means. It just means hidden. But one thing isn't hidden. The fact that these very same beings who have lifted themselves up as so powerful, ruling over us, were cast out of heaven with the flick of a finger. Jesus Christ said, recorded in Luke 10:18, he replied, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. These same entities didn't have any power over Jesus Christ in the higher dimensions from whence they fell, were cast out, and they certainly don't have any power over Jesus Christ in this dimension, or any other for that matter. So we can move forward without fear. We can move forward in victory, but we do need to move forward. We are the counterculture to their Black Awakening. We are the Great Awakening. We are the body of Christ. And this is his story, and this is our story because he allowed us to be a part of it. How awesome is that? That he would give his glory and honor to us. Absolutely amazing. There's no one like him. All right, let's hit it. These are just a few highlights of the Russ Dizdar interview. I'll put the full links below because the 3 or 4 witnesses that I'm going to play for you, the total length of their interviews is probably 5, 6, 7 hours. So this one is a 1-hour interview, but I will put the links to each and every one of these down in the description box if you guys want to go and listen to the entire interview, which of course I highly recommend. So let's kick it off with our brother Russ Dizdar as he gives us a short introduction.
Here's what I can say coming from the underground, that it is far more organized. It is astoundingly supernaturally powerful. The world has no idea what's coming. The intelligence agencies can't touch this. They just cannot grasp it. They have no threat analysis for this, none, let alone being assimilated when it all comes down, because it's hell's shock and awe that is coming. There's no new world order. We all know the concept of chaos before new order, but that's by design. That's by decades of development. There's no ability for the Antichrist to come out unless he has millions of these super soldiers that'll be here, and that's part of the missing part of prophecy over the years. You hear a lot about the Antichrist, maybe a little bit about the false prophet, but there is none of this without a vast multi-continental, supernaturally augmented level, and I believe at the very least the approaching of hybrid or at least augmented humanity. These soldiers will be beyond anything humanity's ever seen.